They brought her in a cage, heavy chains wrapped around her arms, legs, and even her neck. The creature was taller than a human, her body covered in glowing blue markings. Her skin shimmered under the lab lights, like crystal and shadow mixed. Together, her eyes were bright violet, and they never blinked. Everyone in the room stood back. Afraid, silent, watching. They called her many names: beast, weapon, monster, threat. But she didn't scream, didn't growl, didn't even move. She just sat inside the cold glass chamber they had built for her. Her breath fogged the glass, slow, soft, almost sad. One man, a technician named Daniel Cross, stood at the back of the room. He was not a soldier, not a scientist, just a systems engineer. His job was simple: keep the power running, check the sensors, record the readings. But something about her made him stop and stare longer than he should. The creature, she didn't look like a killer. She looked tired. Daniel noticed something strange. Whenever people shouted or pointed at her, her pulse spiked. The sensors blinked red. But when no one was near, her vitals stayed calm, slow, steady. That night, when the lab was nearly empty, Daniel returned. Alone, he stood outside the chamber and whispered, "I don't think you're a monster." The creature tilted her head slightly. For a moment, Daniel thought she understood. He checked her file, but most of it was locked, classified. All it said was, "Unidentified alien female, captured during Operation Orion." No name, no history, no known language. Just one note at the bottom: "Extreme danger, do not approach without armor." But Daniel kept coming back. He brought a thermal blanket one night. Seeing how she shivered in the cold, he didn't enter the chamber, just left it near the sealed door. When he returned the next day, the blanket was gone. It was draped around her shoulders, gently held in her clawed hands. The guards noticed, and they weren't happy. "You're getting too close," one of them said. "You want to die?" Daniel didn't answer. He just looked at the girl through the glass. She was staring back at him, not with hate, but with something softer, something like curiosity. He began to speak to her more quietly during his rounds. He told her about Earth, about the stars, about the way music sounded in the wind. She never replied, but she listened, and one night, her glowing fingers moved slowly across the glass. She drew a shape, a star. Daniel's heart pounded. She was trying to communicate, not with words, but with symbols, with feeling. He smiled and placed his hand gently on the same spot of the glass. To his shock, she mirrored him, pressing her hand against his. The moment didn't last long. Alarms blared as guards rushed in, seeing the interaction on the cameras. Daniel was dragged away, yelled at, suspended from lab access. "You crossed a line," they said. "She's dangerous." But the next day, something strange happened. The lab's systems glitched. Lights flickered, doors refused to close, and inside the chamber, the creature sat still, silent but glowing brighter than ever. She didn't move, but her presence was different. The scientists grew nervous, afraid she might attack, but she didn't. She just looked toward the empty hallway, toward the place where Daniel used to stand. Her eyes glowed softer, and one tear slid down her cheek. No one saw it except the camera and Daniel, watching from the security feed in his room. That night, he whispered to the screen, "I'll come back." And deep inside the lab, the creature blinked once, slow and calm, as if she heard him and believed him. For 2 days, Daniel wasn't allowed near the lower levels. He was reassigned to a quiet storage sector far from the creature's chamber. But his mind didn't rest. All he could see was her violet eyes staring through the glass. Not with rage, but with something like hope. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered the warmth of her hand through the thick glass. That simple moment had changed everything. She wasn't a beast. She was someone who remembered stars and felt cold. On the third night, the alarms triggered again, brief, just for a second. Daniel checked the logs secretly. Chamber 4 had a temperature spike, and the creature had moved close to the electric fence. Not attacking, just pacing, waiting. He made up his mind. He wasn't going to let her sit there in silence. He walked into the restricted zone, swiping an old ID card he had copied weeks ago. Guards were on break. The hallway was dim and quiet. Only a soft hum filled the air. She was still in her chamber, sitting on the cold floor, arms wrapped around her knees. The blanket he gave her had fallen beside her, soaked with dew from the chilled air. Daniel approached the control panel. He hesitated, then opened the inner door, not the main one, just the shielded first gate. The creature looked up, surprised. Daniel stepped in slowly, both hands raised to show he had nothing. "I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered. I needed to see you again." She didn't move. Her glowing eyes studied him, curious but calm. He took a slow step forward and gently placed the blanket over her shoulders again. Her skin shimmered like ice touched by the sun. But it wasn't sharp, it wasn't dangerous, it was soft and warm. Then it happened. One of her hands rose hesitant, clawed, trembling, and she touched his arm. Not with strength, not with threat, with care. Daniel held still, barely breathing. Her fingers were cool, but not cold. Her touch was light, almost as if she was afraid he would pull away, but he didn't. He smiled, whispering, "You feel alive." Her hand pulled back quickly, as if embarrassed. But then she did something no one expected. She reached for the floor and traced a shape with her finger, 3 loops and a line. He knelt beside her and copied the motion in the dust. She smiled, just a little, just for a second. That moment was broken when the lights snapped on and a voice barked through the speakers. "Unauthorized access security," and wrote. Daniel stood up fast, backing away from the gate. The creature stood too, but didn't attack, didn't scream. Instead, she pressed her hand to the glass wall again. "Just like before, I'll come back," Daniel said as he retreated through the door. She watched him until the last second, then curled back into her blanket. Not like a beast in a cage, but like someone waiting for a friend. Security dragged Daniel into the upper command room. They shouted, cursed, demanded explanations. He told them the truth, that she wasn't violent, that she made symbols, smiled, even touched him gently. They didn't believe him. "Just lucky she didn't slice your face open," one officer said. "You think monsters understand feelings?" Another scoffed. Daniel was suspended again, this time with a threat of permanent removal. But that night, the base experienced a full blackout. Systems across the sector went dark. Only Chamber 4 stayed powered. The creature didn't try to escape. She just sat by the glass, her glowing fingers forming the same symbol again and again. Later, when the logs were reviewed, they saw a strange thing. The blackout wasn't a failure. It was triggered from inside Chamber 4. The creature had done it, and yet she harmed no one. She didn't break the glass, didn't even move from her corner. One scientist whispered. "Maybe she was sending a message," another replied. "Or maybe she just missed him." Daniel watched the footage from his room. His heart beat faster when he saw the symbol again. Drawn with such care, he traced it on his own screen, whispering the shape with his finger. That night, outside his small window, a single word appeared on his frost-covered glass. Drawn from the outside, glowing faint blue, it said, "Daniel." The next morning, Daniel woke up to frost still clinging to the window. But the glowing name was gone. He rubbed the glass, wondering if it had been a dream. But deep inside, he knew it wasn't. She had reached out, not with strength, not with fear, but with trust. They said she couldn't speak, that her throat was too different, her language unknown. But Daniel didn't believe that anymore. If she could write his name, if she could remember music and draw stars, then maybe. She just needed someone to listen. Later that day, Daniel snuck into the old archive room. He pulled files no one bothered to check: videos, old recordings, test logs from the first weeks after her capture. Most were silent, but one stood out. It was blurry, low quality, but clear enough to hear the whisper. One word, soft, broken. "Stop." The creature had said it while being shocked during an early test. No one noticed then, no one cared, but Daniel did. That night, he returned to the lab, this time through the old maintenance tunnel. He knew the guard's shift changes. He waited until the cameras blinked for routine maintenance checks, then slipped in. He reached her chamber silently. Heart pounding in his chest, she was awake, curled under the blanket he had given her. Her glowing eyes met his, not surprised, not scared, just quiet. He tapped on the glass gently and smiled. "I missed you," he whispered. "Do you remember?" "Me?" She stood slowly, walking to the glass. She raised her hand again, but this time, she didn't trace a symbol. She placed it flat on the barrier and stared into his eyes. Daniel took a deep breath, then placed his hand on the same spot. And then, she opened her mouth. A crackling sound escaped first, like static and wind. Then slowly, softly, came a shape of a word. "Don." "Eel." His heart stopped, his name, in her voice broken, rough, but real. She had learned it, remembered it, practiced it in silence. He stepped back in awe, not from fear, but from wonder. "You said my name," he whispered, smiling. "You really said it." Her mouth moved again, harder this time. "Don." "Eel." Then she touched her chest slowly and said something else, something new. "Za." "Ra," he blinked. "Zara," he repeated. "That's your name." Her head tilted gently, like a nod. Then for the first time, a tear rolled down her glowing cheek, and this time, she wasn't afraid to let it fall. The moment was interrupted by a heavy mechanical sound. The security door behind Daniel hissed open. He turned fast, but it was too late. 2 guards rushed in and dragged him away before he could explain. One shouted, "What did you say to it?" Daniel yelled back, "She has a name. Her name is Zara." But they didn't listen. They pulled him through the corridor while alarms echoed around them. Inside her chamber, Zara stood frozen. She watched him disappear down the hallway. Then, with all her energy, she pressed both hands to the glass. The power surged again, but not to break free. She just wanted to see him one more time in the control room. The director replayed the chamber footage. He leaned forward when he heard the name. Not Daniel, Zara's. The alien had spoken it clearly, twice. The room went silent. "She's intelligent." One technician said softly. "She's trying to connect," another added, but not everyone agreed. One senior officer slammed his fist on the table. "It's a trick," he growled. "It speaks now to gain sympathy. Next it'll burn down the whole facility." The room fell into argument, voices shouting over each other. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in a small holding cell. His badge was gone, his access revoked, but he wasn't angry. He was smiling, whispering to himself. "Zara. She told me her name." He knew something had changed. Not just in the creature, but in the people around her. Some of them had heard her voice. Some had seen the tears. That night, as storms raged above the facility, Zara sat by the glass wall. She hummed a tune Daniel had played for her once, soft earth music. She didn't know the words, but the melody echoed in her throat like a memory. Outside her chamber, one young guard walked by. He paused, stunned by the sound. He whispered to himself, "She's singing." And far away, in his cold, dark cell, Daniel whispered back, "She's becoming more than they ever believed." Asterisk. The air inside the facility had changed. Ever since Zara spoke Daniel's name, people looked at her differently. Some still feared her, others were confused, but a few had started to wonder if she was more than a prisoner. Daniel was still locked in a small room deep underground, no windows, just a flickering light and the hum of the walls. But he never stopped smiling. She had spoken. She remembered his name, she trusted him. And he wasn't going to let her suffer anymore. Zara was alone again. But not like before. She sat quietly, humming that soft tune Daniel once played. And when no one was watching, she pressed her hands against the glass. She waited, she listened. Every step outside made her glow a little brighter with hope. But the commanders were planning something else. They called it a containment reset. They believed her emotions were a threat, her voice a manipulation tool. The order was simple: drain her chamber, sedate her, restart her evaluation from 0 to them. She was still just an unknown weapon. Daniel heard this plan through a vent. A technician, whispering in fear, didn't know he was being overheard. Daniel pressed his ear to the wall, his chest tight. "They're going to hurt her again," he whispered. "I can't let it happen." He knew the old tunnels beneath the base maintenance shafts and frost-covered paths used long ago for coolant repairs. They led close to the holding chambers, and even further, out into the frozen mountains. No cameras, no guards, only ice and silence. That night, during a scheduled reactor maintenance, he escaped. He tricked the system to overload the cameras for 30 seconds. Just enough, crawling through old vents. Bruised and cold, he made his way toward Zara. Every pipe echoed with his heartbeat. Every shadow whispered danger. Inside her cell, Zara stood, sensing something. She pressed her hand to the glass, her skin glowing faint blue. And then, a hiss steam rising from the back wall. A panel popped open, and Daniel stumbled in. Covered in dust and ice, she gasped softly and took a step back. But when she saw his face smiling, alive, her eyes filled with light, he raised a finger to his lips. "I'm here to get you out." He opened a second panel at the base of her chamber, one only engineers knew about. It was small, barely wide enough for her, but she crouched and slid through. The hallway beyond was dark and freezing. Every breath turned to mist. Every step echoed in the frost. They moved fast, side by side. She had never been out of her cell since capture. Every wall, every sound was strange, but she never let go of Daniel's arm. He guided her through the ice maze like he had walked it 1,000 times. Above them, the alarms hadn't sounded yet, but time was short. The plan to sedate her was scheduled in less than an hour. Snow fell inside the tunnels through broken pipes. Zara looked up at it, soft white flakes touching her glowing skin. She paused and held one on her fingertip, her eyes wide in wonder. Daniel stopped too, watching her smile for the first time. It was small, quiet, but real. They reached the last barrier, a frozen service door that hadn't opened in years. Daniel pulled the old lever. It creaked and groaned. But the door didn't move. He kicked it, pulled again, his fingers bleeding from the cold. Zara stepped forward, her hands glowing brighter. She pressed both palms to the metal. A soft hum filled the air. The ice melted slowly, and the door opened. Cold wind rushed in, sharp and wild. Mountains stretched before them, endless white and silence. But they were free. Daniel looked at her, his voice shaking. "This is it, Zara. Freedom." She looked out, eyes wide, glowing softly like stars in the snow. But behind them, the base finally noticed. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, and voices shouted. They had minutes, maybe less. Zara turned to Daniel, and for the first time she spoke clearly. "Run." They dashed through the snow, feet sinking, breath burning. Searchlights began to sweep across the mountain. But they didn't stop. Zara held his hand, guiding him through the storm like she had lived in snow her whole life. Gunshots cracked behind them. Daniel fell once, but she pulled him up. Then a voice echoed through a speaker. "Stop now, or we fire." Zara looked back, her body glowing bright like a warning, but she didn't attack. She raised one hand in peace open, calm, and whispered, "Please." The guards hesitated. For a moment, they saw her not as a monster, but as a girl trying to live. Daniel and Zara disappeared into the snow, and the storm swallowed them whole. For 2 days, no one saw them. The snowstorm had swallowed their tracks, and the mountains had hidden them well. Search teams returned empty. Helicopters scanned the valley, but found nothing. Inside the base, panic began to spread, not because of the escape, but because of what came next. A signal was detected, not human, not machine. It pulsed with strange rhythm, ancient code. The message was clear and short. "Return the girl, or the sky will fall." At first, they thought it was a trick, a bluff from another rebel group. But then, a massive ship entered the system. Black as night, silent, older than any known model. It floated above the earth like a shadow, not firing, not moving, just watching. The world government scrambled. Meetings were held in secret bunkers. Scientists analyzed the alien signal again and again. The truth was terrifying. The ship was not from Zara's planet. It was from her people's queen, a ruler who had been searching for the last survivor, Zara. Meanwhile, far away in the icy woods, Daniel and Zara had found a cave. It was small, dry, and hidden beneath a fallen cliff. Zara was weak, her energy drained from protecting them during the escape. Daniel stayed close, gathering wood, building fires. She never complained. She just curled beside the flames, breathing slowly, glowing faintly. "You're going to be okay," Daniel whispered. One night, placing a blanket over her, Zara looked at him and nodded once. She spoke rarely, but every word mattered. "Daniel." "Safe," she said softly. He smiled. "Because of you." The next morning, a sound echoed through the cave. Not footsteps, not human. Zara sat up suddenly, her eyes glowing brighter than they had in days. "It's her," she whispered. "The queen." Outside, a light descended from the clouds. Not sharp, not hot, it was warm, soft, golden like sunlight on frozen snow. A figure appeared at the edge of the forest hall, covered in royal white armor that shimmered like liquid moonlight. Her face was hidden behind a glowing mask. Her voice echoed in the air without speaking. Zara stood slowly, walking out of the cave. Daniel followed, confused but alert. The figure raised one hand. There was no weapon, no threat, only calm silence. Zara bowed her head slightly. The figure finally spoke, not through sound, but directly into their minds. "You survived, my child." Zara didn't answer at first. Then she stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "Why now?" The queen paused, then spoke again. "We searched, but the humans buried you from the stars. You carry the last crystal blood, Zara. You are royal born." Daniel stepped forward, unsure what to say. Zara turned toward him, then back. "To the queen, no more cages," she said firmly. "No more silence." The queen looked at Daniel for the first time. Her eyes behind the mask glowed faintly, reading his memories. "You are the one who touched her without fear," she said. To him, Daniel nodded. "She saved me." "I only returned the truth," the queen spoke again, this time louder like thunder wrapped in silk. "Human, your kind feared her, chained her, hurt her, but you gave her a name again." Zara stepped between them, her voice strong. "He is my friend. I will not leave him." The queen was silent for a long time. Then she raised her arm, and a large circle of glowing light formed in the air. Inside it, Daniel saw images of Zara's homeworld, peaceful cities, crystal towers. Then he saw them burning, falling, humans in armor, explosions, chains, cages. His heart sank. "I didn't know," he whispered. The queen nodded slowly. "Most don't." Then came the question Daniel didn't expect. "Would you come with her, if I let her return?" He looked at Zara, then back at the queen. "I would follow her anywhere," he said without fear. Zara smiled, just slightly. Her glowing fingers reached out and touched his hand again. Warm, steady, real. The queen stepped back and the light around her shimmered like a curtain of stars. "Then listen, Daniel, Cross of Earth. This world still fears her, and my patience is not endless. Return with her, or this planet will be judged by the fire it once gave." Daniel looked at the sky. The stars above flickered with strange movement. More ships, more shadows. He turned to Zara. "What do you want?" he asked gently. Zara looked up, the snow falling in her silver hair. She whispered, "I want peace. With you." And in that frozen moment, under the silent threat of the stars, Daniel made his choice. Daniel held Zara's hand as the light faded around them. The queen's ship hovered silently above the mountains. Its engines didn't roar. They hummed softly, like a distant heartbeat in the sky. Zara stood between two worlds now, one that hurt her, and one that barely knew she existed. But Daniel, he had chosen to stand with her, back at the human base. Panic had turned into silence. The High Command knew what the alien ship meant. They had orders to prepare countermeasures, but no one truly believed they would survive an attack. The queen had sent one final message. Your time ends when the sun sets, unless she is returned unharmed. Inside the base, someone made a choice. It wasn't the commander, not a general, it was a nurse. She had watched Zara cry through the glass. Weeks ago, she remembered the way the alien girl whispered Daniel through her tears. She stood and spoke into the emergency channel. I don't care what you think she is, she said, but she's not a monster, and that message was broadcast live across a dozen secure feeds. People listened. Citizens began asking questions. Who was this alien girl? Why did she run? And who was the human that helped her? Daniel and Zara were still in the snowy forest when the Queen lowered a transport pod for them. Zara touched the edge of the ship but paused. Her glowing hand hovered over the door, uncertain. Daniel placed his hand over hers and whispered, "Only if you want to." She turned to him. And for the first time, she spoke in full, clear and soft. "I don't want to leave you," Daniel smiled. "Then let's go together." But just as they stepped forward, the snow behind them exploded. A blinding blast, the ground shook. Daniel was thrown backward, slamming against a tree. Zara screamed not with violence, but with fear. Soldiers burst from the trees, weapons drawn, faces covered, a rogue squad operating without orders. One of them shouted, "Take the girl down, now." Zara stood between them and Daniel. Her body glowed with deep violet light, brighter than before. A force rippled from her, shaking the branches, melting the snow at her feet. But she didn't attack. She opened her arms and shouted, "No more pain." The soldiers hesitated. One of them lowered his rifle, but another fired. The beam struck Zara in the side. She gasped, stumbling to one knee. Daniel, barely conscious, crawled toward her, shouting her name, "Zara!" Her skin flickered. Dimmed, she looked at him, eyes wide, fingers shaking. "I didn't want this." The Queen's ship reacted immediately. A beam of golden light shot down from above and surrounded Zara in a protective field. But the damage had been done. Daniel cradled her in his arms, blood glowing softly from her wound. "Stay with me," he whispered, tears running down his face. "You're going to be okay." Zara tried to smile. She lifted one trembling hand to touch his cheek. "You made me feel alive," she whispered. Above them, the Queen's voice roared across the sky. "Enough!" A wave of energy spread from the ship, disabling every weapon in the area. The rogue soldiers dropped to the ground, stunned and speechless. The Queen descended in her true form. She stepped from the ship, not in armor, but in robes of light and sorrow. She walked to where Zara lay and knelt beside her. "My daughter," she whispered, voice breaking for the first time. "I should have found you sooner." Daniel looked up, his voice filled with pain. "Please, help her." The Queen touched Zara's chest gently. Her hands glowed bright as she whispered an old alien chant. Zara gasped as the light filled her, but her body trembled with weakness. "She needs time," the Queen said softly, "and rest. I can keep her alive, but Earth is no longer safe for her." Daniel looked down at Zara, her eyes half closed. She whispered again, "Come with me." He nodded without hesitation. "I'll follow you anywhere." The Queen opened a portal beside them, glowing like stardust. Daniel lifted Zara carefully, holding her like something sacred. Together, they stepped into the light, leaving the frozen world behind. The Queen turned once more to the soldiers. "You feared her because you never tried to understand her. Remember, this monsters are not born. They are made by those who cannot see the heart inside." And then she vanished into the stars, leaving Earth silent, still and shaken. The portal closed behind them with a sound like wind exhaling. Daniel opened his eyes and blinked at the strange new world. He stood on a platform made of smooth silver stone. Above him, 3 suns floated quietly in a lavender sky. Around him, tall crystal towers shimmered like frozen music. But he didn't care about the sky or the towers. His eyes were only on Zara. She lay in his arms, weak but breathing. Her skin no longer glowed like fire, but shimmered gently like a sleeping star. The queen stepped forward, her voice soft and proud. This was her home. Before your kind turned it to ash, but now she has returned, and she is not alone. Daniel nodded, still holding Zara close. She's not a monster, he whispered. She never was. The queen touched her daughter's forehead with glowing fingers. Energy flowed into Zara like a soft tide. Her breath steadied. Her wounds began to close slowly. She opened her eyes and whispered, "Daniel." He smiled, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "I'm here," he said gently. "I'm not leaving." Zara sat up slowly, weak but alive. She looked around, eyes wide with wonder. "This is home," she said, voice trembling. Daniel looked around too, and for the first time, truly saw her world. There were no cities like Earth's, no machines humming loudly. Instead, creatures of light moved across bridges made of mist. Alien children laughed near glowing lakes, and floating trees swayed even without wind. Daniel stepped forward, helping Zara stand. The people, Zara's people, watched silently from afar. Some were afraid, some curious, but none moved closer. Then Zara did something that changed everything. She took Daniel's hand in hers. Not in fear, not in shame, but with pride. She raised their joined hands toward her people and said one word: "Peace." The crowd was silent, frozen. Then, slowly, one elder stepped forward. He had 4 glowing eyes and walked with the help of a living branch. He placed his hand over his heart and bowed. "Chosen," he said in their language. One by one, the others followed, bowing, whispering, "Peace. Peace." Back on Earth, news spread of what had happened. People saw the footage, the Queen's warning, and Daniel's bravery. Protests broke out against the rogue unit that had attacked Zara. Scientists demanded answers about the truth of the first contact, and slowly, fear began to turn into guilt. The Earth Council requested a meeting with the Queen. They begged for peace, offered apologies, even reparations. But the Queen gave only one reply: "When you learn to see with more than just your eyes, we may speak again." Zara spent days recovering in her old home. She walked through gardens that had grown wild since her people fled. She hummed songs Daniel had taught her, and birds of light came to listen. Her skin glowed not with power but with joy. Daniel stayed by her side, learning the ways of her people. He didn't try to lead or speak for them. He just listened, helped, and held her hand when she needed strength. One evening, under the purple sky, Zara brought him to the top of a crystal tower. She looked at him, eyes glowing soft gold. "My people are healing," she said, "but I want more than peace." Daniel looked surprised. "What do you mean?" Zara stepped closer, placing her hand over his chest. "I want to live," she whispered. "Not hide, not fight. Live with you." His breath caught in his throat. She leaned in gently, pressing her forehead to his, and their energy flowed together, light and warmth, heart and soul. In that moment, a mark appeared on both of them, a glowing ring on their wrists, pulsing with shared light. It was not marriage by Earth tradition, nor by alien ritual. It was a bond, something deeper, ancient, pure. From that day forward, stories were told across the stars, not of a war, not of fear, but of one human, one who touched a girl the world feared, and found a heart instead of a weapon. Back on Earth, children watched holograms of Zara smiling, Daniel teaching alien words to human school kids. Statues were built not of soldiers, but of her hand touching his. A reminder to all that monsters are not born, they are made when no one dares to see. And the final words Zara spoke to Earth, broadcast to every screen, every planet, were these: "I was once in chains, but he saw me. He touched me not with force, but with kindness. And that touch changed everything."